Hey everyone, and welcome to the Color Authority. This is Judith podcasting out of Milan, Italy. I'm so excited for again another episode of my podcast. I'm going to be podcasting for the next couple of weeks and months with the most inspiring people in the world of color. So if you want to know more about color and learn about this topic, make sure you tune in to the Color Authority. Follow us on LinkedIn, follow us on Instagram under the Color Authority, and let's see what my next guest has to say. Today I'm going to be talking to Dominik Eisend, who steers and drives Merck's global pull marketing activities within Surface Solutions, always focusing on design and technology at automotive's OEMs. He introduces new trends and stylings and listens closely to what is needed in the market to be able to present the right creations at the right time. Dominik has a background in transportation interior design, focusing on materials and CMF. Prior to his role at Merck, he has worked for several OEMs such as Mercedes-Benz, AMG, Ford, and as well the German-Chinese automotive startup called Borgward, where he was leading the color trim design team. He also loves to work with materials or to experiment with new technology to generate material-driven design experiences. He looks at color and surfaces to play an incremental role for good product design. In his eyes, the material design will play the most influential role in the future of mobility. Welcome, Dominik. I'm happy that you're here. How are you today?
Hi, Judith. It's fantastic to be on board today, and I'm very looking forward. Thank you.
We met a few years ago when you were working at Ford, and ever since we've been meeting up at Milan Design Week. Obviously, when Milan Design Week is taking place, it is actually taking place in September this year. And they've also, again, organized the event of La Donna Immobile, which is obviously for automotive designers, or in my case, ex-automotive. So I look forward to see you there as well. Are you going to come to Milan?
Oh, yeah, I'm looking forward for it. And I think all the designers out there, they're devastated to travel and to hit that event up, definitely.
So Dominik, I'm sure that some people are going to notice, probably you have noticed as well, but you are the first male interviewee on my podcast, on the Color Authority. At a certain point, I was just looking and it was all women. And I think you are aware of that a lot of people that work in the world of color and also in color marketing group, you've probably seen that the number of females is very high. So welcome, you are the first male interviewee.
Yes, good that you mentioned it. I did recognize this, of course, and especially in color marketing group, as you mentioned, there's a strong female force going on.
Yes, but I'm happy to have you here. And just to warm up the conversation, this is a question that I ask to most of my guests. You have obviously been working in color for many, many years in the automotive industry. What is color to you, Dominik?
That's a good question up front. I think color is everything, right? I mean, color really makes our daily experience that we're seeing, that we're interacting, and that we experience architecture. What color really makes it happen, right? And it's not only color, it's the texture, is the flop of it, already diving into this topic and how it all looks out together. So I look at color not only as color as a separate part. I always look at it as a product, kind of like, yeah.
And that's because of your background, right? Because you studied interior design for transportation. So that's how you learn about the topic of color. But how important was color per se in your studies, and how that you then after apply these learnings to your work at indeed some of Europe's largest OEMs?
Yeah, as you said, I studied transportation interior design, and part of that was, of course, that I've learned how to design the shapes of interiors of vehicles as well, and I've also learned about the importance of colors and materials. And I think the best learning that I took out of that it's probably that it needs to work together. So when designing the color, for me personally, it was always super important to really look at the whole object, as more like an experience instead of just looking at the color. I mean, the automotive industry still kind of like has these strong channels where you have a designer working on the exterior design, one is working on the interior architecture, one is doing the graphics, HMI design, super important topic now as well. And then, of course, there's the CMF designers. And I think for me, it was always really important to see all these valuable channels of creatives in like one thing. And in CMF, I think is a fantastic opportunity as a designer working in this field, because you are in all kinds of areas of the car. You're working maybe of the exterior paint of a car, or the interior paints, decoration materials. You develop and design surfaces within the seats, for example.
So you just mentioned quite a few different, let's say, although it's all design, but different sub-departments within the automotive industry and the largest OEMs. So you have indeed interior, you have exterior, and then you have CMF. How was that collaboration? Because you need to get it right. You need to get the harmonization also. You need to have harmonization between all the different materials as well as in color matching. How did those processes come about within those OEMs in general?
I think it's really a super important thing, that as a CMF designer, that you work together with your exterior guys, for example. I mean, exterior guys, of course, they have this big exterior bold shape in their mind. But then I've always really enjoyed the exchange with these guys, because it's super important. Colors it's not only about choosing a color, it's more about developing a color, especially looking at the future. It's all about functionality within surfaces. And that's even more important, that these different facilities work together quite well.
You said not just choosing a color, but developing a color.
Absolutely.
Could you explain what that means to the audience? What is the difference between just choosing a color? And I just added the word just, because it's never just choosing,
Exactly.
of course.
Exactly.
But what is the development of a color? How does that come about in the automotive industry?
Well, the automotive industry has like very strict regulations and boundaries, if you want to call them like that, and as we designers work closely together with our friends from engineering, and then, of course, all other departments. But we need to make sure that we're designing a product that's actually that creates a value, that people want to buy, that are out there, that are wanting this new car, they're wanting this new color, they're wanting this, buying this new experience. And that's super important here. And talking about this whole interaction of things, it's really important to understand that color really is not taking from the shelves, there is timelines together for color development, especially. I mean, it's about the ideation process with the concepts that are created first, and then it's about testing these colors. And depending on the material the color is applied, there's different tests that these materials need to be specified for. And they do need to function for it, as the automotive manufacturers, of course, they want to guarantee for their products that for example, a seat is not going to have some ugly stains after you maybe dropped some liquids or spilled some liquids on the seat. And all these technical aspects and safety things that need to come into consideration as well when speaking about color. So it's never just taking a color from the shelf.
No, I agree to that. I remember, obviously, back in the days, for those who are not aware, I used to work in R&D, product planning of Kawasaki Motors Europe. And I would fly into Japan a couple of times a year, and I would bring them the trends in color from Europe, especially the bigger markets, which in the motorcycle industry normally are Italy, France, Germany, and sometimes, depending on the model, it was UK. And I remember that from the moment that I presented my colors to the design team and the CMF team in Nishiakashi, Kobe area, by the time they were implemented on the motorcycles, it would be, especially if they were new motorcycles, so they were completely new designs, by the time everything was ready, we were like a couple of years ahead. When I left Kawasaki in 2009, I had already developed some design in research, or helped the designers research how the motorcycle should look like and what colors they should apply for 2012. And that's when I left in 2009. And I can imagine in the automotive, with larger vehicles than motorcycles, that's even longer.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. These development cycles, of course. Yeah, that's a huge topic. I mean, it's not like, we're talking about inspiration, of course, we're inspired many times, especially in the CMF, from fashion or textile design, or product design, but especially like fashion, like they have such different cycles, thinking of some of the big fashion chains. they throw out like 16 collections a year and like really like create. I don't even know how these designers are doing it. I must be working day and night. Some pretty crazy sometimes, but it's super fast. Right. And of course, then when speaking about a car or a mobility product, it does have different regulations to it that you need to make sure, and that you need to design your products, your materials for it, that it actually fits in this kind of cycle. And
Yeah, I remember the stress tests, the scratch tests.
Oh, yes.
I remember all of that, especially obviously on the tank of the motorcycle, because you would lean on that with your jacket, with the zipper and all that. I remember that, but it was exciting. I sometimes miss that time, working in the automotive, working in the motorcycle industry for one of the, fastest motorcycle brands in the world. It was exciting times. That's for sure. And I'm sure you're still excited working within the automotive, because that is your true passion, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I love cars. I mean, I'm absolutely a mobility enthusiast, and I'm absolutely hooked whenever new cars come out. And I think this is never going to change. I think that's just my inner passion, that's connected to it.
Well, just probably within your market, a stupid or at least a funny question. What car do you own currently? And what color has it? And what color has the car?
All right. Okay. Well, that was actually the question that I asked 2 weeks ago when at Merck we had the ECS, and I asked that question to the presenter. So now it's coming back to me as like a boomerang. I like it. Well, my car, it's I really like the shape of it. I'm driving an Audi TT. And I like the clean approach on how the exterior designers and as well interior designers worked on the surfaces, and I think this is really fantastic with this car. I like the overall package of it. It's really nice, and color is white, but don't tell anyone.
But what year edition? Because there were a few editions, right, of the TT.
Yeah, I think it's a S-Line edition. So model year, I think it's 2016 or something. So it's the newer design. Yeah,
I think the TT is a great car. Yeah, what would be your favorite dream car? Like, if you would have all the money in the world, what would you drive?
Wow, that's a good question. We came to that point that, and if you would have all the money in the world, there would be, I guess, a car for each kind of like scenario and event you'd like to participate or take part in, So I would say there would be a garage.
Full of cars, right? Yeah. So Dominik, having worked for some of the most important and prestigious car brands, not just in Europe, but just generally globally, could you reveal a little bit to the audience about how color selection takes place and where do materials step into that process?
I think especially breaking it down back to these 4 areas of car design, I think that the CMF field is really winning in its importance, since CMF is everywhere, right? We spoke about the exterior, we spoke about the interior, so it's all the surfaces basically. And more than that, even in the future, it's really much more about functionality and of these surfaces. So what can be combined with these textiles that are maybe applied onto a decoration part, textiles on a seat? Are there maybe some hidden switches, that the user, the driver can actually use to, if there's maybe then an added value to these surfaces?
So it's not just about color and material. It's also about texture, of course. It's about surfaces. It's about even additives. I can imagine that you put on materials so that indeed they don't fade. They don't get too dusty, of course. It's an interesting world where I think in a lot of industries, still color is one topic. Material and application is always important. But I do think that in the automotive and also consumer goods, it's one of the most complex ways of actually doing coloring.
Absolutely. And I think talking about big brands, and car brands, I think the CMF takeover, is really a super important part when designing or creating a brand message that you want to have out there with your product. And I think the CMF is probably one of the fields that's the most helpful in creating these kind of messages and as well experiences. One of the presenters 2 weeks ago at the ECS of Merck was talking about, OEMs should not be called origin equipment manufacturer anymore. It should more like be origin experience manufacturer. And I think this is absolutely true, and super exciting on how car companies are stepping into the game to explain this experience. And I think materials are like, or CMF area is like probably the number one go-to area to really help to design and explain this vision and to create this experience.
Yeah, I think you fully agree. I think a lot of brands out there are changing, and obviously the automotive industry generally needs to change with the larger trend that we've been seeing for many, many years, which obviously is younger people not buying cars anymore. They're renting cars or they're sharing cars. Yeah. And then obviously there is also the whole big sustainability topic on how to move forward within the mobility world. How do you see that changing currently within Europe, but also globally?
Yeah, as you mentioned already, the two super important trigger points, sustainability and ability in general, that are definitely the two super important points to speak about. And I think this is really interesting because, sustainable mobility solutions are really, I think, important, for our environment. And I think the situation with COVID did change some of the people's, thinking as well about our environment. And we should maybe move on what we can do and what we can't do. And I think this is why there is a growing demand for cleaner and more sustainable solutions. And I think the manufacturers and as well the supply chain, is really challenged to change the game and develop new solutions that are greener.
Where do you think those solutions are moving into? Let's say, how will the mobility world look like in the next 10 years? And I know for you guys, that's nothing. That's tomorrow. But let's say then, how far will you go and how will you envision that future in your world in the automotive?
Maybe coming to the, owning point, I think there will be still the ownership of cars. I think this is still going to be around, but maybe then for these purpose vehicles, we just spoke about, maybe you have this one specific vehicle for this one purpose. Maybe there's this one all rugged 4x4 vehicle where you're really trying to hit the off-road areas out there, really use that on maybe the weekends for fun. And then maybe on a daily basis, if you're living in the cities, for example, then maybe there's a ride-sharing service, that's just ordered via app and it comes to the house every day. And then even, talking about autonomous mobility solution, that's even more a game changer, I think. Then I think it's going to change even how mega cities and where people live. I mean, during COVID, we all have experienced it doesn't really matter where we are. We don't need to come to this one certain place where we're working. But I think when talking about autonomous mobility solutions, then you could even be in your car on the way somewhere and working, so you're moving home office and I think this is changing then as well, where the people are going to live.
Yeah. So really your car is an extension of your living room or your office.
Absolutely.
So while you're on the go, the car is going to be driving for itself. So you just get to do what you need to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're seeing it. We keep seeing it already. Started some years ago with some of the manufacturers and that are already drawing these visions, out there, that they have this movable living room, that's super important. And that kind of brings me back to the point that I described earlier. I think then it's really up to the interior design and CMF, of course, to create these experiences, because of course, that's a different design than if there's no active driver's seat needed anymore, and if you're more in this loungy area where you can hang out, read a book, you on your iPad, whatever, work something, have a conference or whatever, or just hang out there, have a coffee, watch some TV, that's really. So it's changing how we are using these mobility concepts.
Remember, I visited Geneva Car Show pre-COVID, obviously, every single year. And I saw that those concepts were really extending. And I love them. The way the finishes, the materials that they are using inside those concept cars are not even that different from materials you use in your living room. For example, I saw interesting materials used as, for example, woods, but then true wood, like the wood that you possibly also apply on your dinner table, for example, bamboo, for example. So I see that material-wise, there's a lot happening here as well.
Absolutely.
Taking into account the weight, it has to be light, but still, I think there's a lot of more warmth and comfort being incorporated in these concept cars.
Yeah, I think so too. And I fully agree on some of these visions out there. And I know, Judith, you have been, let's say, you've been a heavily traveler, pre-COVID at least, I think you spent some time on airport lounges as well. And it's really, I think they need to be stepping up their game, because when these cars come into place, then an airport lounge is really not anything to mention anymore.
No, absolutely not. But neither are airplanes. So yeah, they probably need to get working on their game indeed, and stepping it up a little bit. Yeah. So you've worked on some rather prestigious models when you were at Mercedes AMG, but also at, you did the sporty model for Focus RS. Can you tell a little bit about your particular passion and maybe talk a little bit more about the design details to these projects?
Yeah, I was able to start out in my career working for Mercedes as an intern, and and then I was able to land a sponsored project. As designers working in the car industry, it's always super important to get like a model, let's call it like that, sponsored by an OEM. That's kind of like the highlight. I think that's super fantastic. And I had this great opportunity working with Mercedes AMG in Falterbach, and they have this beautiful studio that's like out there outside of Stuttgart.
I've been. Yeah.
All right. That's nice. I mean, that the area is fantastic. It's these apple trees. And then every once in a while, you hear like this intense engine sounds, one of the models, coming around the corner. And this is really about, it's a fantastic company. And they told me, well, I could use this car and I could rebuild the interior to basically show my design concept that I had worked on. And that was really a fantastic opportunity, because I think my boss handed me the key to the car, and I said, well, maybe it's C63 or something, like one of the sporty C-Class models that I could work on a little bit. And then I came down to the parking lot, and it was this beautiful SLS. And I was just, what? Super excited. And then, it was a fantastic time. And I was able to rebuild the whole interior together with external companies, internal trim shops. And it was really, really cool. Presented that. Then it's more like a differentiation strategy I worked out for the brand. I was really happy to see then some of these elements that were part of this whole strategy would then find into the series models. That was really fantastic. And then working for Ford was really, really nice as well, because it was a different perspective. And we talked about how important the brand is as well, and that brands, especially talking about CMF design, bring in, this restraint somehow, or let's put it that way, more like a taste, that goes in this maybe more sporty way or more like comfortable way. It really kind of depends on the brand and the model and series, of course, that you're working on. And with the Ford RS was really fantastic, because it was this prestigious model in a Ford racing history that was redone basically. And I was the lead designer from the CMF part of it, and that was really fantastic. And of course, then that you have then some things, in the car industry, it's many times you have then carryover parts basically, So there's parts that might be coming from a different car, or will be taken over for this car to stay constant and decrease costs a little bit. And so for this case, I had to work with this one existing seat, right? So I couldn't really design a complete retrim of the seat, but I still wanted to make it like looking different, so that it kind of like gets this RS character. And for that, I designed a graphic, and I worked together with a textile supplier, who was able to come up with a new technology as well, in a top stitching technology, where they were able to apply this graphic towards this textile. And then the next challenge would, of course, be, we spoke about these automotive boundaries, in production, you kind of like have these very strict quality terms, of course, laid out, that you want to make sure that whatever design you're doing, it's always positioned in the right way, for example. And that was a bit challenging because my design was really like you can imagine like a super nicely tailored suit that would fit perfectly towards the shape. Yeah. And that's what I did here with this particular seat. And then of course then it's just these challenges coming up. Then there's one company then who's making the trim covers, and then another one is making the seat, and then another one is making the textile panels. And then at some point you need to bring these guys all together, because if everyone would then say, well, I have like 10 millimeter tolerances and another one adds a 5 millimeter tolerance, you're going to have a seat that's like completely out of spec. And that was the big challenge here for this design, that we made it happen together as a team. And that was really beautiful, passionate people together, then you can really make it happen.
And especially when you're challenged, teamwork is so important, especially when you're coming up to these type of issues and you need to make it work with people that think differently, because engineers, technicians, they do tend to think with a different way to car and to color and aesthetics, right? So it's not always the easiest part. Yeah.
Oh yes, good point, Judith. Absolutely. I can just remember, the CMF reviews, that happen out there. That's probably like where most of the senior management people probably show up, because there's something to see, right? So there's something tangible, that you can maybe get your hands on, check out these seats and textiles and things like that. And no matter where I have been working, if it was like leading the color and trim team at a Chinese German startup, called Borgward, or maybe then at Ford, it was always these kind of meetings where I draw the biggest attention, where really people came by and say, oh yeah, that looks nice. Yeah, cool. And then, and it's fantastic that you get this attention by the senior management. But of course, always, everybody has an opinion to color. So that makes it then very interesting sometimes.
Oh, I remember that. Every year, those meetings, and they were long meetings, and we would all be standing for long hours around those motorcycles. And obviously, sales and marketing were there, and they had big voices, and it was, and it's important because they're the ones selling it, of course. But I remember just standing there, and obviously 80% of the conversation would be in Japanese. Now, we just as one of the only non-Japanese, together with a few of my fellow sales and marketing managers from Europe, we were just standing there waiting.
What was that for you? Like someone is maybe then talking in another language for like 10 or 15 minutes, where you have no clue what's going on. And then maybe a translator comes around and tells you, like after this 15-minute monologue almost, that they're not sure about the color, right?
Yeah. Or one of the CMF designers would come and whisper in my ear a little bit about what was going on, right? But 5 years, obviously, I don't speak Japanese. I know the numbers. So I know about, because probably the same in your case, you use numbers. You don't use the model name until it's official. So I would remember the numbers that they would use to indicate the motorcycle they were talking about. But just one look at the CMF designers, and I knew what direction the conversation was going to. So yeah.
So kind of like a good indication to look at their buddies.
Exactly, yeah. So you have made quite a career switch earlier this year. You were part of the CMF design process in the automotive world. And let's say now you're working behind the scenes at Merck, which is a major supplier of pigments that are then obviously working in the automotive industry. Why this career change? And what is it like to look at color from a different perspective?
Yes, absolutely. I think I do get this question actually quite a lot, but I think as a CMF designer, interior designer, it's super important and for me, it has always been super important to really know about technologies, what is really out there. And at some point in the design world, it's then kind of, you need your partners that are out there, and there's so many beautiful companies out there that really have these fantastic technologies and really like scientists, that work on these things on a daily basis. And I've always wanted to experience how it is on the other side, because I always had really good relationship with the with the direct supplying companies as well that are involved in this whole supply chain. And I always wondered, how is it actually to work on the other side? I always thought this is super inspiring. And then this opportunity came around and said, well, yes, absolutely. Merck is a fantastic company and very exciting to be part of, and took that chance. Yeah. The car industry is changing a lot right now. And I think development cycles are getting much shorter. There's less time to do things. And I think suppliers and actually as well then raw material suppliers like Merck are more and more challenged to come into the game, and be part of shaping the future.
So as we are talking indeed about trends, what are the trends for automotive in the near future that you're talking about? We talked about it a little bit before, but how do you see those related to color? Where do you see colors move in the automotive?
Well, right now, I do, when thinking about colors in general, I think there's two streams, right? One stream is to simplify certain colors. So as kind of like these colors you can like carry on, and they're strongly connected to the automotive brand. So they kind of like have their setup there. But then on the other hand, it's really about like standout colors, to really have like these certain super nice strong colors that are very effectful, but might not be for this everyday car, but more like these for special cars and editions as well. And
so you see two different trends going. So you see one going more in all day livability, longevity, and then one in the more like say vibrant, exciting direction.
Yes, absolutely. And then with the topic we spoke earlier about sustainability coming into the board, it's much more exciting that maybe it's more about colors looked at it from a different angle, So many times we design colors to have them like looking exactly how our vision should ever be or play this certain color. But maybe talking about sustainability, it's more about process colors. And I think it's really about then colors that maybe happen to be because they're triggered by the raw materials, or maybe they're recycled or reused materials that are really play a more and more important role in all these different parts of the car. And I think these colors, and there we're talking about really about neutral palettes, they're coming into the game as well.
That would be a big change for the automotive industry, going into natural palettes, colors that possibly look like raw materials, which I obviously immediately am thinking about, softer grays, beiges, neutrals, as in browns, and even colors that mix, right? Like those greenish, muddy colors. Let's see if consumers are ready for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this whole topic about sustainability, and I'm not saying that we only exclusively going to see these colors anymore, but I think this is really a process that really has to do with the change of consumer behavior. So people are more and more, thinking about the products that they're buying into these brand messages. And there it's super important. What are these brands up for? What is their message? How do they want to position themselves?
So at work, obviously at Merck, you also work on future automotive trends for coatings. I've seen the presentation a zillion times. It's a popular presentation and loved by the OEMs. And it's something that you, as I know, you love that type of work. But how do you now within Merck follow up on that process of doing trends and colors? What is the process that your team within Merck follows to create those trends for the automotive?
Well, of course, we kind of like have to deal with the situation of not being able to travel so much. I mean, we're all hoping, as you mentioned in the beginning, that at some point we can go back to these beautiful trend shows, as like the Milan Design Week is, right? So this is super important to have this exchange with like-minded people, as we cannot travel so much, or as these shows are not happening that with this intensity as they were. I'm really hoping that Milan, as you mentioned, I do think, and I think we'll probably see each other again in Milan. But the trend shows is one part, of course, and then there's lots of other resources, about reading about the future and trends, and trying to really find out where the society is moving towards, as this is really a super important point of understanding trends, and what one of the speakers mentioned as well at our ECS event 2 weeks ago, was also that is if you want to define the tomorrow, it's really important to understand the today. And I think this is super important. And once these inputs are all collected, we create stories and create presentations, and that are then, of course, linked to products of ours, like styling ideas, how pigments could actually look like, when they are in a formulation. But what I personally think right now is super, super important is these functionality of surfaces when talking about cars. And I think Merck has really fantastic solutions out there, how really it's not only about effect pigments, but also about functionality, about technologies that are really involved in that. And that's where I'm working on right now, to really include these topics and that we do have into these kind of like contexts with trends and present that in the right light.
Yeah, you have to weave in obviously what you have available, and what you could do would be interesting to show to designers in the automotive industry, and then obviously match that with what you're seeing happening in society.
It's also about, when then Spoken is speaking about these solutions, it's really, I think the car industry, it's for especially these functional topics, it's really about collaborations, and triggering the conversations between designers, engineers, marketeers, really to have an open exchange on how to move on, and checking out the possibilities that we have. And
so one last question, Dominik, regarding your private life, is, if I may, as a designer, I know you love to create and make stuff whenever you have time for it. What is your last or your latest project or something that you're working on?
As you mentioned already, I like to play around with materials and technologies as well. And this whole thing probably started like 5 years ago, when I was designing the packaging design of a portfolio of mine, and this is all about the let's say process, and especially like the aging process of surfaces of for example brass or copper, so kind of like metals. And I did put that now into kind of like this channel, and I called it Zeitmetall, where it's really a combination of the beautiful oxidation process of different metals, combined then with graphic design and installation art. I really I love to do and play around with these things. I'm still missing to have this kind of like workshop, so yeah. I try to transform then our living room once in a while on the weekends to this workshop area. not everybody likes that, I can tell you that.
No, I can imagine, but that's what you need the garage for, right? With all the cars.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a few applications or use scenarios for a garage, exactly.
Well, Dominik, I thought this was a great episode. I love talking to you. I feel again closer to what used to be obviously one of my favorite markets, which is the automotive. I have to say, I do miss it a little bit, talking to you about these topics a little bit. But I want to thank you for your time and all the interesting information, insights that you've shared with the audience. And I hope to see you in Milan then.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Judith. I really enjoyed talking to you as well. Thanks.
So this was Judith Van Vliet from the Color Authority. Thank you for listening again to yet another episode. If you haven't done so, please go to Apple Podcasts, subscribe, review, and send us feedback on this episode. And I hope that you will be listening to the next episode coming out very, very soon. Thank you, and have an amazing, colorful day.